Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream. Disneyland.
Just go to Action Park. There's no other park like it.
Six Flags Great Adventure. It's not a world away.
Paramount's Kings Island.
We will officially open Universal Studios Florida.
Hello, I'm Michael Eisner.
Now, here is your host.
Hi, Defunctland guests. My name is Kevin Perger, and welcome to another edition of the Defunctland podcast. This episode and the next two will be a little different than our normal podcast episodes because all three will feature the same guest, former Imagineer and veteran puppeteer Terri Hardin. She's worked on many films and attractions, one being Captain EO, which we will discuss next week. On today's show, however, we will be discussing her time with the Muppets and Jim Henson, her Imagineering career, and even a special story of her with Michael Eisner. So I apologize for the change in format, but I'm sure you will see that it is very well worth it. And now on to our very special guest on today's show, former Disney Imagineer and veteran puppeteer Terri Hardin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for coming. This is a big get for the Defunctland podcast. You have done many things, and I want to get right into these questions. There's going to be two parts to this interview. You've done a lot in your career, in case you're not aware. Our first category is just that. I have a few questions relating to some of the projects you've worked on, and the second category is going to, of course, focus solely on Captain EO.
Okay.
My audience has asked a few questions, and I have some of my own. So you ready for the first category?
I am.
All right. You've worked on films such as Men in Black, The Flintstones, and Ghostbusters. You have puppeteered famous characters such as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and the Demon Dogs from Ghostbusters. You worked on attractions such as Big Thunder Mountain Railroad in Paris and Splash Mountain and Muppet Vision 3D in the United States. You've done all that.
Yes, that is correct. Good job.
Thank you. I am good at stalking people on the internet. And let's talk about that last one. To begin with, I have a few questions. You knew Jim Henson personally.
Yes.
Tell me what it was like to get to know him and get to work with him.
Well, first of all, my hero was Frank Oz. I have to be completely transparent because Jim knows this up where he is. And I was impressed with Jim Henson and all that he had created and all he had done. But my hero was Frank Oz. I thought this man was an absolute genius. I swooned every time he did a Fozzie Bear and Miss Piggy. I just thought he was amazing. And so I was flown into New York to do a McDonald's commercial involving Chicken McNuggets. At the time, yes, this was 1982, so those of you who weren't born, let me just take you back. There were no computers, there were no smartphones, there was barely VHS, not DVDs, etc., etc. I think that time was laser discs were the big thing, and cassette tapes. But I was so excited because I was going to New York. It was my first time flying first class, and I was going there to perform a commercial for McDonald's involving Chicken McNuggets that I had sculpted. They were little foam puppets that danced around, all practical because we didn't have computer-generated stuff. Later on, they did computer-generated stuff with the real McNuggets, but we did the Chicken McNuggets. I don't even know if you could find those commercials, but the way YouTube digs, you probably could. But I was brought in with two other puppeteers to do this commercial with a man that I hadn't seen in some times, Mr. Tony Urbano, an amazing puppeteer in his own right, one of the best in the world. And when last we had known each other, we got into an argument. Because the one thing I get really upset about is if you decide to pick an altercation with me, which I welcome if you have something. I don't have a catalytic converter on my mouth. I'm always going to tell you the truth, my truth anyway. So if it offends you, I expect that you'll come and talk to me about it, but we must do it in private, not in front of others, or I will rip you a new one. So Tony violated that in front of all of the coworkers, and I didn't like it. So I shot back at him and left. And I don't know if he fired me or I quit, but it was kind of simultaneous. We were very hot. We were very angry. I do not like being yelled at or scolded in the presence of others. You take me privately, and that way I am free to speak. So I left. Next thing I know, about a year later, I get a call and I'm told I'm on a plane to do Chicken McNuggets commercials. So I was confused. but excited. So we did this, and everything was going swimmingly. It was like nothing had ever happened between Tony and I. I was very excited. And then we wrapped for the day. And Tony, we were all standing there. So it's 4 puppeteers and Tony the lead. And Tony has done the Snuggles Bear. He did a lot of cruise ship stuff. He's magnificent. Just Google Tony Urbano. He's just a genius puppeteer from way back when. But anyway, he announces to the puppeteers, all 4 of us standing there, that he would like to go see opera, and I all of a sudden find myself alone. The other puppeteers obviously knew Tony and this passion, and they were gone. So he turns to me and he says, "Terri, will you go with me?" And I had never seen opera. And I said, "Tony, I don't know. I've never seen opera. I don't know if I would enjoy it." And he said, "Please, it's at the Met." So he took us to get tickets, and the tickets were $80 a piece for a box seat, something that now probably runs $300, at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Now I'm in my 20s, and it's going to be La Boheme. It's going to be in French. I'm about as excited about doing this as watching wet paint dry. I really don't want to spend $80. I really don't want to go. And Tony is just so excited. So I turn and I say, "What's in it for me?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Look, Tony, I this is going to be a lot of my money. You know, I'm in my 20s, and and it's in French. I don't speak French. I just don't. Please, what are you going to do if I go with you? Because I can see you really want to go. What do you want?" I said, "I want to go see Ha," which was Jim Henson's studio. And Tony said, "Okay, I'll take you to see Ha, but you're not going to meet Jim Henson." And I said, "Look, I really don't want to meet Jim Henson. What I really want to do is go down into the department where they make Miss Piggy, because I want to find out how do they make Miss Piggy, because I was a puppet builder, and I could not figure out how they made her, because she was not covered in fleece like Kermit. She had something else done, and I couldn't figure it out back then." Tony says, "Okay." So the next day we make an appointment and we go over to Ha, and we open the doors, and it's so much, I can equate the experience like many of you who have been to Club 33. You walk through that door, a door you never thought you were going to go through, and it takes your breath away. And it has a beautiful spiral staircase with a balloon in the middle, and you're circling it to go upstairs. And Jane Henson, Jim's wife, was supposed to meet us, but coming across with his hand outstretched was Jim.
Oh, my.
Jim automatically turns and sees me and walks directly to me and shakes my hand. "Who are you?" Now, the reason he did this was because women in puppetry were very few and far between. Out of 30 people, you could figure that maybe 3 of them would be women at the time. So anytime a lead puppeteer found a woman, they were excited. So he walks up and wants to know all about me. He knows that I'm with Tony. I must be very good. And he starts to question me. And Tony breaks us up and says, "She's with me, hands off." And I go, "No, I'm not. I haven't seen you in a year. What are you doing? What is this possessive stuff?" And Jim just smiles. So he takes me through and shows me that Miss Piggy and Bunsen Honeydew have been flocked. It's called flocked. It's an electromagnetic current and felt particles, and it uses electricity and glue to make the ends of the felt stand on end when you cover the foam sculpture with glue. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was just like gaga for it. So then Jim had to leave, and we went through a few other things, and then we excused ourselves. And as I was coming down the spiral staircase, a small door opened about 3 foot high that I had not noticed before, and something was shoved into my pocket. And then the door closed. Nobody saw it. I could tell it was not meant to be seen. So I exited it, and when I got to my hotel room, I opened it, and it was a message from Jim asking me to call his company when I got back home. And when I got back home, he invited me to come and shoot in New York, and I declined.
What?
That's right, folks. I said no.
You're crazy.
Thank you, but no. And he thought that. In fact, he got on the phone and he said, "This is Jim Henson. How do you say no to me?" And I said, "Jim, I want to do the best I can for you, but I can't do it in Manhattan. I did not like Manhattan. It kept me on edge. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't comfortable. Any state that has methane coming from underneath the street because of the garbage that's collected, I can't live there. And he said, what makes you think that you can work for me and not live in Manhattan? And I said, well, Dave Gonzo lives up north in Northern California. That's not in Manhattan. Kevin Clash, he lives in Baltimore. That's not in Manhattan. Steve Whitmire lives in Atlantic City. He goes, okay. I get your point. He said, all right. But he said, I'm not pleased. And he hung up.
Oh, wow.
So that was 82. In 89, Disney got together with Jim to make Muppet 3D Theater. And they purchased a portion of the Muppet franchise at that time, 89. And I get a call from Jim Henson. Hi, Terry, this is Jim Henson. I said, no, it's not. He goes, yes, it is. And I'm like, shut the front door, really? And he did a Kermit the Frog voice. I go, oh my gosh, Jim, hi. And he said, I'm coming to California to audition for Muppet 3D Theater. I expect you to audition, and believe me, if you're not good, I'm going to embarrass you. So he said, I'm going to embarrass you. You're going to wish you weren't alive.
Now, hold on. Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yes.
Jim Henson's speaking voice is very wistful and kind of almost whispery. Correct? I mean, very low-pitched. So I'm trying to imagine him saying these things to you in this very peaceful, like, smooth voice. Is that kind of how he's angry? So
angry. He was mad at me. How dare does this Terri Hardin chick say no to me? Nobody says no to me.
Right, but it was almost like playful mad,
which was adorable.
Because he wanted you so bad.
Well, he cared about me as a puppeteer, and I think I amused him because nobody says no. And then they don't back it up with legitimate. I mean, you've done your homework. You know, he was like, oh my gosh, this kid has been stalking me, to use your words, Kevin. And he said, bring your portfolio, because he said, I want to see your work. And he said, come to the audition, and if you're not good, I'm gonna get you. And without extending your podcast to forever, at some point I'll tell you about the audition. It was quite amusing, but needless to say, not only did I get the part, but we started creating a show together. And then unfortunately he passed away and the show never saw the light of day. And it was devastating to me when we lost him. I was actually sculpting Big Thunder, Splash Mountain Tokyo, and the Imagineers really needed me at Imagineering to complete my work. And I was devastated by his death. I had just talked to him the night before and made an appointment for him to come by the Splash Mountain model at Imagineering on his way to approve the sculptures for Muppet 3D, to say hello to everybody, because I had been shooting with him, and everybody loves the Muppets and everybody loves Jim. So I called him up on the phone and he answered, and I said, would you mind allowing some time to swing by and seeing me? I have a whole team here that's building Splash Mountain Tokyo, and they all want to meet you. And he said, no problem, I'd be happy to do that. And I said, you don't sound well. And he said, I just have a little cold. And the next day he was dead.
Oh, my.
So really rough on me. And Imagineers were very sweet. My supervisor actually isolated me in another location. He said, I can't let you go home, but I can isolate you so that you can work. And if you burst into tears, you won't have witnesses. So that was really sweet. But yeah, that was tough, really tough. And then it came time to program the characters for Muppet 3D, and they brought me into the Tahunga building here at Disney. Has all kinds of buildings. One of the ones they program the attractions and build the full-size sets is called the Tahunga building. And Frank came up to me. Jim really thought you were a talent. And I burst into tears, and he said, man, I feel exactly the same way. So it was rough on all of us for quite some time to lose him so young, because he was a genius and he really was a sweetheart and a bit of a stinker. All puppeteers are a bit of a stinker, so you have to kind of watch out for us.
Wow, that's a touching story.
Yeah.
And you are, of course, as you probably know, so lucky that you got to not only meet him but work with him and become friends with him.
Very fortunate, and I have a picture of me standing right next to him in a big group shot from Muppet 3D Theater, and I look at it every day and I'm so thrilled. And he autographed my Kermit the Frog Hallmark ornament. I didn't think to take a picture while he was autographing it, and Frank Oz autographed my Miss Piggy Hallmark ornament the time I was collecting those.
Well, to back up a little bit, I have a question from someone in the Facebook group. Paul Tidd asks, what made you decide to get into puppeteering as a career in the first place?
Well, this person who asked this question, this is a very good question. I mean, maybe you thought that this was something, I don't know if I should ask this question, but I'm telling you it's a good question to ask. Because I'm now 60 years old, and I was born in 1957. Now, if you remember your studies, 1956 is when Rosa Parks was fighting for her right to sit on a bus because she was a black woman. The back half of the bus was full where black people were supposed to sit, and she needed to sit down. And she finally sat at the front, which she was not supposed to do, and hence her story. Well, at that time, my white mother fell in love with my black father, and they were married in the same year. And then they had me 1 year later, a light-skinned girl with hair that looks like it came off of a black person. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be an actress, and no one would hire me because, in their words, back in those days, it looked like my parents had done something. I remember thinking as a kid, what does that mean? They sent away cereal box tops and got me in the mail? What does this mean? As a kid, I just didn't understand it. And my mom tried to have me audition for commercials, but they just didn't like the way I looked. She looks too mixed. Now, fast forward to today, many mixed people are revered for the exotic look that they look like. Tiger Woods or Halle Berry or myself included. People are fascinated by your look, but back then they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I kept acting in school, and then one day I met an amazing lady who introduced me to puppets, and once I was introduced to puppets, I knew I could have my art and my acting together, and no one would care what I looked like. So that was the catapult. What's great about it is, as a puppeteer, I could build anything, I could create anything, I could perform anywhere, and nobody friggin' cared what I looked like. They weren't looking at me.
And that was just, you started as a puppeteer, and then that led into you being an Imagineer. And so that's my next question is, what was your foot in the door for Imagineering? Was it the work on Muppet Vision?
No, Imagineering was very interesting because as a young girl, I was first introduced to Disneyland at 4 years old. And then I always wanted to go once a year. And it took my dad saving up his money. He was a phone man in Hollywood, the first black phone man in Hollywood. And he would save up his pennies so that we could go once a year, just like many of you do now. It was always a park that was high cost. It was an investment. But it was well worth it. There was nothing like Disneyland in the world, and it was my favorite place on earth. So my dad started to take me there every year. And when I was about 10 or 12, as many of you who are parents, you kind of let your kids go run around the park, and you kind of do your thing, they do their thing. Maybe you meet for lunch, see a show, and then off they go again, and then you meet for fireworks. That's kind of what my parents did. And that's the beauty of what Walt created. And I would automatically go to the Jungle Cruise. And I would sit on the Jungle Cruise, and I would get in line, and I would ride the Jungle Cruise, and I would get in line, and I would ride the Jungle Cruise, and I would get in line, and I would ride the Jungle Cruise. That was pretty much my entire day, was riding the Jungle Cruise, because I loved the figures on the ride, and I loved that they shot the hippos, which breaks my heart they can't shoot anymore, but I digress. But all of this, I would just watch in fascination, and at one point, it's me on the boat and the cast member. And the cast member looks down and he said, "What? Why are you here so many times? What is with you?" You know, he says, "I got to ask you because you've been riding this ride since 8 o'clock this morning. I finally get the chance to ask you because there's nobody." And I said, "I just love these figures. They're so amazing." And he said, "They're sculpted by someone. Did you know that? There's someone who made these." And I said, "Walt Disney?" He said, No, Walt Disney put the people together. But Walt Disney has a company called Imagineering. At the time it was WED. And WED has amazing people it brings together, and one of them is Blaine Gibson, and he's the sculptor of these figures. And I wrote it down, and I said, oh my gosh, there's a person who does this? And he said, there certainly is. So I ran home and I started combing through newspapers. I watched Wonderful World of Disney every week, trying to get a glimpse and to further understand Blaine Gibson. He's been my mentor and my hero for years, even though he didn't know it. And I made a vow that I was going to do what he did. And so through the years, I did movie sculpting, and I would apply to Disney, and Disney would reject me. And then I would apply to Disney again, and Disney would reject me. In fact, so many rejection letters, I could wallpaper my entire 1,500 square foot house with every rejection and that friggin' mouse that I came to hate. Every time I got a letter, I would say, and so one day I'm like, because I got hired in 87, but one day around 1980, I think early 87, I decided that year in 87, I decided to just let it go for a little bit. Sometimes you have to put your dream on the side and do something else so you can regroup and attack it. Doesn't mean you're giving up. It just means, okay, the troops are retreating for a little while. We're going to figure out how to attack this wall. We're going to get over this wall. And I was working for a little company called Shafton Inc., and they made Charlie Tunas, and they made McGruff the Crime Dog, and they made the Smokey the Bear, and I was sculpting heads in this place for these walk-around characters that, no Disney walk-around characters, but all of Universal characters, all of SeaWorld characters, all of other park characters this company builds, and I was the sculptor for them. And one day, a friend of mine walks in, and he sees me in the back, and he says, Terry, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm waiting to apply to Disney again. I'm just, working here. This is my little oasis as I regroup and figure out what I'm going to do. And he goes, well, I work for Disney now. And I said, what do you do? He says, I paint sets. And I said, oh my goodness, that's awesome. And he said, I'll tell you what, give me your information. I'll put a word in for you. They need people. And sure enough, the next day I was called, and they wanted to interview me. And I went in to the Tahunga building and met with a man named Matthew Pretty, and he looked through my portfolio, and all the time he flipped through the pages, because back then we didn't have iPads, guys. He flipped through a big, giant portfolio full of photographs, and every time he did, he said, oh my God, oh my holy, and then he looked up with big round eyes and said, where have you been keeping yourself? And I said, stupid me. I kept knocking at the front door when I should have come in the back. And he smiled, and it took a long time for them to hire me. It took 3 months, and the whole time I'm trying not to take, I need to take work, but I'm trying not to take work because I can tell. I went through 8 interviews. I knew they liked me. I knew they liked what I did, but it just took them forever to hire me, and I kept trying to be available because I didn't want to take a job only to find out, Terry, we want you to come in, because whatever job that was, I was going to leave it, and I didn't want to do that to anybody. So all of a sudden I get a call, this is a true story, I get a call from Dolly Parton, not Dolly Parton herself, but her company. And they say, for 2 weeks over the Christmas holidays, well, 4 Christmas holidays, Dolly Parton is doing a Christmas special with Burl Ives and Mac Davis, and we want you to be one of the puppeteers. And I was like, done. And then I get a call from Disney. I'm in rehearsals with Dolly, and then I get a call from Disney, and Disney says, we want you to do your 9th interview, and it's smack dab in the middle of my shooting Dolly Parton. And I tell them I can't do it. I say, sorry guys, you've seen me 8 times. I can't do the 9th. I'm working with Dolly Parton. And they say, then you're out of the running. Oh. We're sorry, we can't use you. And I explode on the phone. Oh my Lord. I did not use swear words because I don't swear much unless for emphasis. But I blasted them. I told them I knew they were Disney people because they were living in Fantasyland. And so the guy on the other end his hair must have been permanently blown away from the phone because I was furious at them. How dare you treat people like this? How dare you do this? I don't know if you're smoking crack or what your problem is, but I don't need you people. You people are ridiculous. You're idiots. And I hung up. 3 days later, they sent me a contract. And I said to them, if I knew getting mad would get you guys off your rumps, I would have done it weeks ago.
Jeez, that's crazy. That's absolutely insane.
Isn't that nuts?
That's super weird.
Isn't that funny?
You've done that multiple times in your career, apparently.
Well, I try not to explode because I want to give them all the opportunity in the world, but I have trouble when, I'm going in 8 times, I'm showing my portfolio, everyone likes me, and you're going to have me come in to a 9th. Now you're just wanting your butt kissed, in my opinion, and I just let them know that that's what I thought. And maybe that wasn't the best, but I did get hired, and I was put in the model shop under Rockwork. I was to sculpt Big Thunder Rockwork and Dragon's Lair Rockwork and all the wonderful, cool things. And many sculptors told me it was going to be a boring job. And I said, have you ever done rock work? And they said, no. I said, then shut up. It's a great opportunity for me. I'm very excited to be an Imagineer. It was a joyful experience. I've been an Imagineer since then. However, I was there under the employee for 10 to 12 years. I had a break in the middle, and then I came back. And then I was there for, I think, 12 years. And now I'm a contractor. They like to bring people, as I mentioned before, in as contractors. So they'll call me up and say, Terri, you have enough, do you have so many weeks to give to Shanghai? And I have the right to say yes or no. I have my own company, so I like it this way. I would not go back as an employee. I would stay as a contractor. A, I get paid more. And B, I can work my own hours. I can pretty much say I'm free for a week. I'm free for 2 weeks, I'm free for a month, this is what I can give you, and then Disney decides whether or not they want to take me, and they don't always. So, but it gives me opportunities So I'm torn now because I could give them a call and say, do you need some help on Star Wars Land? And just to be able to say I put a tool to something for Star Wars Land. But the problem is I really enjoy rolling out of bed in my pajamas and sculpting in my studio out back. So I'm torn with that, because I do a lot of stuff on my own, and my company is very well known, or pretty well known, hopefully getting more known as we speak here. And so I'm torn, which people find that very surprising, but I'm very happy being an Imagineer and talking to people like you and being at home with my family. So, if something comes up and they call me and they're really against it and they want a couple of days, I'll run in and help them out. But I don't want to tell them that I'm available for weeks and months because I'm not much of an employee mindset anymore. I'm more of an independent mindset now.
What was your favorite Disney attraction to work on?
Dragon's Lair, Paris. I had to fight for it. I had to pitch for it. And Disney doesn't let women sculpt it by themselves most of the time in that. Because a lot of times the women are put in the drawing, design, painting, like you have your people like, and it's not to say this is a bad thing, it's just the way Disney kind of works. But you have a lot of the women are painters and they do the design concepts and then they go out and they talk about the fabrics and how it's supposed to look and things like this. Or you have people that paint the murals and put them together, or they make the costumes and all of this sort of stuff. To have a woman in the field slinging lath and plaster is very unusual, but I was perfectly capable of doing this because I worked in the film industry first, and that's what I did. I was also capable of moving a cherry picker and carving things 40 feet tall because that's what I did in the movie industry. So when I was brought into Imagineering, I thought that they would take me from the model sculpting to the field because that's what I do, and they didn't want to do that. So, because they just wanted the men to go over there, and it's not because they're chauvinistic, it's because with Paris, it was going into France. And France's attitude about women is different from the U.S. So they wanted the shortest distance between 2 points. So for me, I was able to design the entire Dragon's Lair ride, but then I ended up having to teach it to a man who was going over there. And they were kind enough to give me a man who really loved my work, who really edified me and promised me they were going to do exactly what my model said and not divert from it. And that's the kind of person that I wanted when I did Dragon's Lair. A good Michael Eisner story for you. We at Imagineering were not fans.
So before you get into this, I've had multiple people that comment, multiple people that talk to me because I make jokes about him, and I was kind of worried bringing you on because if you watch the videos, I do not treat him as the god of theme parks. I treat him as almost the he started out as someone that was salvaged it, and then he turned into, you know, the I use the old Dark Knight quote, you either die a villain or live long enough to see yourself make poor financial decisions that force you into closing down people's favorite rides. So that's kind of what Michael Eisner's looked at as far as Defunctland goes. So I really want to hear your perspective on the reign of Eisner in that 20-year period.
The reign of now, Eisner as a guy, he was kind. He was a sweet. Whenever I meet him at family gatherings and things like this, he was always very kind and friendly and actually funny. But as the CEO of Disney, he was terrible. And one of the reasons we felt, and I'm saying this from the Imagineering side, he was terrible. And the reason was because he wanted to create the Hollywood pictures, to do more movies that were not G-rated for Disney. He wanted to have that adult section of movies, and in order to do it, he kept taking money from the amusement parks, the parks we were doing, because the parks were successful. So for Big Thunder Mountain Paris, we had a certain budget, and the next day, our supervisor, who was our show producer that was overseeing working with us in the creation of Big Thunder Mountain, which is the best mountain in Paris, because you go, you mount it on the mainland, go under the water, and come up on an island.
Yeah, it's out on an island. You can't even get out to.
It's awesome. It's really cool. Not just because I sculpted it, but it's because it is really amazing. And we were working on this, and we had this. It's not that it's not a beautiful ride now, but we had this incredible ride because the guy and I, who didn't get along in the beginning, but we fixed that. I won't go into that. But the point is we were working together to create the experience. He finally saw that what an Imagineer means is to create the ultimate experience for the guest. So he came up with this amazing idea. Paris was going to have the canoes, and the canoes were going to canoe around Big Thunder. So we came up with this idea of creating a sand cave within the island mountain. Now there's the arch, which was mine. I did the arch, and there's nothing like going there and standing in front of a giant arch that you sculpted at 1/10 scale or whatever I was doing it at. I mean, it was just amazing to see every line that I put in my sculpture immortalized for all time in Paris. It's a blessing is what it is. So he creates the sand cave, and here was the scenario the two of us came up with. You're on the canoe, and you're rowing, and you're rowing, and you're rowing, okay, to the left, okay, to the right. And then all of a sudden, the cast member leading you says, "What's that?" And, you know, you're a guest. You're like, "What do you mean, what's that?" "What's that up there?" "Oh, my goodness, that wasn't there before." And he points to a small opening inside the mountain on the island. And he says, "Any of you up for exploring?" Blah, 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 blah. People said no. People say yes. Whatever they say. He goes, "Let's go explore." So you go in and you feel like you have to hunker down because it's a small opening, but you're rowing inside this small opening, and then it opens up into this cathedral of colors reflecting on the inner sculptings that the water has done inside the sand cave. And it was magnificent. It was stunning.
Wow.
And it was what every Disney enthusiast loves. It was a secret. So we were so excited, all of us. This is going to drive them wild. And then Michael Eisner took away $1 million of our budget, and we had to get rid of the arch or the cave. And I did not want to get rid of the cave. He did not want to get rid of the arch, and we argued. And then one day I came in at 7, he had come in at 6 and carved the cave away because he said, I want the arch to stay. And it broke my heart. Yes, this is the best Big Thunder of all the Big Thunders because you board on the mainland and you go up on an island. But, if we had just been able to do that cave, it would have been so wonderful for every cast member. They would have, and it would have preserved the canoe rides, which can be boring.
Right.
For some. So I thought, I'm so proud. But bless Michael, this is what was happening to us in Paris often. So I'm called in by, I forget how we get the call. Oh, Brian calls me. He says, Terri, we're going to do the 20th anniversary of Walt Disney World as Baby Sinclair, because I was Team Baby on Dinosaurs. I was the arms. And Brian says, I'm going to do the puppet and you're going to do the arms. And I said, okay. And he said, no shenanigans with you, young lady. And I was like, why? And he said, because Baby gets to clunk Michael Eisner on the head with the baby bottle. And I went, ooh. So we go down to the Disney Studios. We're going to shoot this opening for the 20th anniversary. You might be able to Google it and find it. And Baby Sinclair is to sit at Michael Eisner's desk, and Michael Eisner says, Baby Sinclair, what are you doing in my chair? And Baby Sinclair says, number 1, number 2. And Michael says, what? And so Baby always has his bottle. So we had all of these producers of Disney showing us these soft bottles I could clunk him in the head with, since I'm the arms. And Brian said, no. He says, no, Baby has a very distinct-looking bottle. It has a little critter in it that he sips up
Brian
into
Henson?
It. Yeah, Brian Henson. Says we can't use another bottle. It will look wrong. And they said, well, then she can't hit him very hard. And Brian says, Terri, you can't hit him very hard. And I don't say anything.
Oh, no.
Terri? Oh, all right. Okay, so we get in position for Mike because the baby's going to hit Michael in the head and go, wise up. So we're sitting there. I take the bottle and I clunk him in the head somewhat gently. And then I get a gift from God. Michael leans behind and face to face he looks at me and he says, Terri, I'm not that good of an actor. You've got to really hit me. And I go, are you sure? Yes. Okay. And Brian goes, oh no. And so when Baby does it, he winds up and I go, bam. And it goes, crack. And Michael Eisner falls back. He's sitting and he's holding his head. And they cut. And the Foley artist, or the man in the booth, goes, we won't need to Foley that, because you could hear the crack. And I had said for all my friends at Imagineering, bip, you know.
That's
and then
great.
Michael came back holding his head saying, that'll work, you know.
that is so awesome. Yeah.
So now you have your Michael Eisner story.
Thank
wherever
you
he
so
is, he's
much.
gonna go, oh my gosh, that kid. I remember that kid. You know?
Yeah, no kidding. That's funny. I mean, I love these the behind the scenes of some of these promos and videos in Wonderful World of Disney and what have you that he shot. I don't know if you I'm sure you have the back in when he did the Muppets at Walt Disney World movie. That TV movie. I don't know. Did you work on that?
No, I didn't get to work on that one.
And they have the scene where Fozzie Bear and Fozzie's mom, a character that for some reason became popular and then never was seen again.
Yeah.
Was talking to Michael Eisner at, I think it was the Grand Floridian. And
yes.
There's a blooper reel online where he just keeps messing up over it, and he just gets so frustrated, and then Fozzie just says, "Can we get another actor in here?"
Yes, exactly, and that's the thing about the puppets, because the puppets are going. They just come up with these incredible antics that I can't stress enough that were stinkers. On the show Dinosaurs, quick story, on the show Dinosaurs, the TV show, Fran and Earl would go out to eat, and anytime people ate, there was a critter on the plate. So in order to keep the little puppet critter, and then someone would be under the floor puppeteering the critter before they got eaten. And so there was this little critter on the plate, and so what had to happen is a technician had to come in and staple the feet of the puppet to the plate so that he wouldn't appear to float. And I can't tell you, Kevin, how many times puppeteers would sneak up, get in the puppet, the guy would staple the foot, and the puppet would go, ow, 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 what are you doing? No, and then they'd grab the other one and they'd go, no, ah, no, stop. And in the beginning, the technicians would just freak out. But afterwards, they just ignore us. They go, oh gosh, here we go again.
That's
these
hilarious.
Crazy people. We were insane. We were just nutty. So that's one of the things that when you see these behind the scenes, yes, that's why for Michael Eisner, he always said he loved the puppets. I think it was under duress, but yeah, we got him on that. And it was the 20th anniversary of Walt Disney World TV specials. So if you get to see that, you can know the behind the scenes. I really clocked him, and I told everybody to watch because I had a gift for them, and it was really funny.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so Disney Paris was a huge project for you to work on, and then and you've done a lot of other things. Can you just real quick list off some of the other attractions you've worked on? I mentioned a few of them earlier, just to wrap up this career standpoint for you.
Well, I started out I was brought on to do Big Thunder, and then I was brought on and then after that I said I want to pick my next one. I want to do Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair was originally just going to be a sculpture. It wasn't supposed to move. So I had to go before Tony Baxter, who I had no idea who he was. Yes, it's true. I had no idea who Tony Baxter was. And The Baxter. And I asked if I said, let's go see him. And they said, you can't just go see him. You have to make an appointment. I said, let's make an appointment then. And they said, look, he's senior VP. I said, I don't care who he is. If he's the one that's going to help me to animate the dragon, get him over here. And they said, you don't just get him over here. We're going to ask him if he will come over. And I kept saying, fine, whatever you need to do. And they said, Terri, you talk so long, which, Kevin, you've just experienced. And so they said, you're going to have to keep it to 20 minutes. And I said, fine. So they made an appointment with Tony. Tony agreed to come over. I'm sure my supervisor said, I've got this wild and crazy, extremely passionate, goofy girl who believes the dragon should be animated, and she wants to state her case. Do you have 20 minutes? And Tony said yes. He came with his entourage, someone to give him a chair, which he sat in, someone to make sure he had plenty of water, someone to make sure he was cool and comfortable. I was in my lab coat that I had illustrated. I illustrate anything that's white. I don't wear much things that are just white, so if they're just white, it's because I've shown extreme discipline, otherwise I'm drawn all over them. And I had my coat, and it had a dragon on the chest. And I looked at Tony, and Tony looked up at me, and I was in a runner position, much like a runner that's going to start off for a sprint or a Disney race. And I was rocking back and forth from right foot to left foot, looking at him as though I was in the gate, like an excited racehorse. And I said, "You're Tony Baxter?" He said, "You're Terri Hardin?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes." I said, "Say go." And he says, "Excuse me, what?" And I said, "Say go." And he says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Say go." And he says, "Go." And I talked at a mile a minute. So this is the dragon. This is what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking the head can be here, and then the head can go up. And then I'm thinking that the paw can do this, and the tail can do this, based on the cat, based on the dog, da-da-da-da-da. And he says, wait. Stop. Take a breath. And I'm like, dude, I only have 20 minutes. We've gone 3. I have 18. You're cramping my style. Let's go. And he says, listen, if I give you more time, will you slow down and explain to me your idea? And I said, of course I will. So I walked him through all my concepts and my ideas about Dragon's Lair. And he said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it the green light on one condition. And I said, what's that? And he said, you be the builder. You design it. Wow. And I went, okay. I mean, I'd never designed an entire ride before. It was the greatest experience, one of the greatest experiences of my life. I've had several, but this one was phenomenal. This was, for Tony to smile down at me and say, you get to do it, kid. I have a couple things I want you to incorporate, but it's yours. Make it happen. And I did. So,
Wow.
So yeah, it's mine. And I didn't get to see it till 2000 because I was never flown over by Disney over to France, but I went on my own. And Matt McKim was one of the major people that was men over there that was making it reality. And I cried because there were things I knew about in that ride that maybe others didn't. And Matt made sure they got in the actual attraction. So I get choked up every time I go in and see it. And Paris just refurbished her before last year, and I went to see her last year and gave a tour discussing my thoughts and telling this story I just relayed to you all. And it was just great to see it. I was surprised at how many people don't know there's a dragon underneath the castle at Disney Paris, but hello, that's why it's the best castle. It is the best castle in the world of all the Disney parks because why? It has a dragon underneath. So go see why it's the greatest castle so that you understand that. Because many people love their own castle, but you don't have a dragon underneath. So, Paris plays their trump card on the dragon. And that's what happened. So that was such a joyful thing to have. I've worked with Jim Henson. I've worked with over 125 celebrities. I've written every name down. And these are people that have mentored me and talked to me and shared their lives with me, one of them being Michael Jackson.
And we are going to pick back up on Michael Jackson and Captain EO next week. If you haven't already, go to the link in the description to pick up your Captain EO 4D for $5 pack, so you can watch next week's Defunctland History episode in 3D, although there will also be a 2D version if you don't get the 3D glasses in time. Terri and I will be back next week for part 2 of our discussion, but for now, don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you for visiting Defunctland.